What's going on, everyone? Alex Miller here from the Eagle, joined by Travis Brown and Robert Cessna. We're inside Kyle Field following Texas A&M's 20-3 win over the Auburn Tigers on Saturday afternoon. First time the Aggies ever beat Auburn at Kyle Field. For the longest time, it was a defensive battle. And Cease, what can you say about the way that A&M was just able to really grind it out when the offense wasn't really doing much?
Hey, well, we'll talk about it. When your defense can score points for you, I mean, oh my gosh, defense was really did a number on Bo Nix. I thought after the first drive, Auburn would score more points because that was a very impressive drive, that first drive. But really, that was it for the game. Defense ruled the roost. A lot of pressure, a lot of good coverage, and of course, the biggest play of the game is they score points.
Right.
Yeah,
Travis?
and when you talk about the defense, it all came down to open field tackling. It's something that they weren't good at early in the season, especially in that Arkansas game and that the Mississippi State loss. But who was it? It was DeMarvin Leal, I think, said that they've actually gone back to hitting in practice, full on tackling in practice, and that little bit of extra physicality, he said, paid dividends in this game.
Yeah, not much going on offense, but when it mattered, the Aggies were able to get some points on the board with Seth Small having a pretty good day. Travis, I'll turn this one to you. What can you say about the way Zach Calzada was able to fight through that injury, the shoulder injury, and just kind of the resilience that he's shown throughout the season?
You can't have Zach Calzada beating an Alabama school without, looking like he's going to get carted off to the hospital. Of course, in Alabama, he took that shot to the knee and limped off and came back in. This one, he crunched his shoulder real hard up against a defender on a scramble play trying to make something happen. Actually, his only running play of the game, really. And came back, looked like he was fine. Then all of a sudden, you could tell that shoulder was hanging, went into the tent, and, we both saw it. Jimbo Fisher went into the medical tent and immediately came out and walked over to Blake Boast and was starting to go over, had the play chart out and was looking at it and talking, and you're like, he's done, with how much pain it looked like he was in. The players said he was in that much pain. But it goes back to what Kenyon Green said, and he said that's the kind of quarterback you want to play for because he came back out with a sling kind of thing on that arm. They said it was a separated shoulder, and they popped it back into place, and he was zipping the ball around just as good as he did before the game as he did after. He didn't score a touchdown. He didn't pass for a touchdown, but you got to think that kind of toughness gave the defense a little bit of even more of a boost than they already had, kind of pushed them over the edge to get that defensive touchdown.
Cease, on offense, the Aggies, they obviously scored enough points to win, but it didn't seem like they did a really good job finishing. When you think about they stalled in the red zone, they get down to the 4, a chains, fumble. What'd you kind of make of the way A&M wasn't able to finish on offense?
What's funny is I really have to give Jimbo. I don't think he called a good game at times. They zoomed right down the field, had 1st and goal to 5. They get 1 yard in 3 plays. They should have scored a touchdown there right now. They were doing so good to eat up 80 yards, and it's easy to say that from the press box. Then they get down there again. They should score. They have 2 motion penalties, and I know he's upset about the penalty calls, and I get that, but still. A&M scores those 2 touchdowns, and suddenly you look at this could be like a 30-3 game or 30-6 game even if Auburn, make that field goal. So my point is, I thought this was going to be a close game. I didn't know what I was going to get from either team going in. I just didn't have a feel for either team. And really, Auburn's offense is really limited as far as breakaway threats and all that. When you watch it in person, they were just engulfed by A&M's defense. But really, if A&M makes a few plays, because A&M could run the ball. When you look at the final stats, A&M could run the ball. The only time they didn't run the ball is when Auburn called run blitzes, and that's how you can see they get those tackles for loss. But really, A&M should have scored a lot more points than what they did. So I know they're frustrated about that, but really, when you look overall, Zach Calzada did not throw an interception. You usually put him down for 1 interception. So I think Jimbo's probably kicking himself. Now, he's upset about those calls. You could say he's upset about that, but he's got to score a touchdown. They got to score a touchdown in that first drive. first and goal at the 5, you got all those weapons. They didn't score, and that kind of set the tone, I think, for the offense because they settled, for 5 field goal attempts?
Right.
Wow, that's 5 touchdowns that you don't score. That's 35 points, and you end up getting only 12 points out of them. Even my math knows that got me in sports writing. You get 50% right.
Well, and so much of the game of Jimbo's play calling depends on that time of possession. And it was pretty evident today that both teams wanted to keep the other team's offense off the field. They were stacking up some really long drives with 10 to 14 plays, especially early in that game. And if you're going to have that kind of success, you're going to hit some third downs, and they were abysmal on third down today. Really, both teams were, and that's been the difference for A&M a lot these last 2 years. Really, is their ability to convert on third down, and it just wasn't there today.
And I'll add one more thing to that while I piggyback and I didn't like some of the play calls. But it's the 9th week of the season. You can't have drops. Way too many drops by Smith and Wiedemeyer. And if they'd have caught half their drops, maybe A&M does score 2 touchdowns. So while I'm a little critical of play calling down in the red zone, you've got to say if they make half the catches of their drops, maybe they do score 2 touchdowns. And Caleb Chapman came back and showed that what hands can do. And I was surprised who dropped the balls today because it was Smith and Wiedemeyer, and those are his 2 favorite targets.
Yeah, and you nailed it too. There, Caleb Chapman coming back today. The deep pass, something that at times had been there, but really just still hasn't been a thing for the A&M offense. But Caleb Chapman obviously coming in and getting almost a 50-yard catch. We'll pivot with this. We've talked all along about how these next two games at home against Auburn, on the road against Ole Miss, was really going to define A&M's season. Cease, I'll start with you. What does this win do for the Aggies and kind of how they look at the rest of the season, and in particular next week going to Ole Miss?
I look at this game as A&M's a lot better than Auburn. And you can say, well, Cessna, what about the offense? The offense, those are fixable problems and really problems I didn't expect. I didn't expect drops. And now, as you said, Chapman's back to that just lengthens the field. That just makes the running game better. And the defense shows they can beat anybody like this. They called a screen pass one time, and they weren't able to get it off because Richardson was in so fast they couldn't even throw a screen pass. So I know Matt Corral's not going to win the Heisman, but he's a good quarterback. A&M's defense will definitely be up to the face to him. And right now, A&M, if they put that same effort on the field the next 3 weeks, they will not lose.
There are games where the offense is so abysmal that the defense is good. This was a game where both teams were connecting passes. There was a lot of good open field tackling on both teams. And so I think that you can chalk this up as a true defensive struggle where both defenses were playing really well. I don't think that Ole Miss is not going to have the same kind of defense that Auburn threw out there. And so I think both offenses will be able to move a little bit more moving forward. I think that the most important thing, and none of the players will bite on it, is the fact that A&M's SEC West title hope is still alive. And I think that that's the thing. I think that they proved that that the Alabama win wasn't just a one-off. They are a good team. And I think they also are in that hunt for the SEC West title, which is what Jimbo Fisher was hired for and which is what everybody is expecting out of any team in the West right now, especially now that that spot is a little bit for the taking with a loss on Alabama. Who knows? A&M could be the biggest Auburn fans coming up on that Iron Bowl because that could put them into a trip to Atlanta.
Well, we'll close with this. See, so we always ask you, top 25 voter, where you see the Aggies, and as far as the playoff rankings go, because that's really what matters at this point of the season. Where do you see A&M kind of falling in line with today's outcome, plus what's going on around the country?
Well, it's just a big win because you could see everybody brag this week about why Auburn was up there, why Mississippi State was up there because their body of work. And unfortunately, A&M couldn't help their schedule. They only had one win, even though it was a huge win over Alabama. They didn't play anybody else that was ranked because they lost to the 2 teams that mattered in losing to Mississippi State and losing those games back to back in Arkansas, which was ranked. But now they've got another quality win. So that second quality win is going to bump them way up. And we've already talked before we got on here of all the losses. Baylor lost, with Auburn lost, maybe even Michigan State might drop down. The bottom line is they're going to be at least 11, 12, knocking on top 10 in the college football playoff rankings. And they got 3 games. And I know Ole Miss is tough there. We've seen a lot of great games at Oxford, but everything's there for A&M right now. The 2 losses are behind them, and they really had to win this game, to me, to put those losses behind.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here from Cal Field. Thanks for tuning in with us, and be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our coverage from today's game. We'll see you next week.